All right, so today we're going to be looking into something pretty interesting. Elon Musk's role in the Trump administration.
Yeah,
We all know him as the guy behind Tesla and SpaceX,
right.
but this goes way beyond electric cars and rockets.
Absolutely.
This deep dive is going to be about government efficiency, potential conflicts of interest, and maybe even a lawsuit
Yeah, a big one, actually.
challenging the constitutionality of it all.
hmm
So buckle up.
It's definitely a fascinating story seeing someone like Musk who, is known for shaking things up in tech,
Yeah.
step into the world of government.
Right.
Our main source for this deep dive is a CBS News article that looks at his work with the Department of Government Efficiency,
DOGE.
or DOGE as they've nicknamed it.
DOGE. I see what they did there.
Of course.
So what is DOGE all about?
Well, on the surface, it seems like a pretty straightforward mission,
Yeah.
streamline operations, cut costs.
Hmm.
But when you have a billionaire CEO involved, things tend to get a bit more complicated.
Well, the article mentions that Musk's been seen with Trump discussing DOGE's work.
Right.
But the White House says he isn't an employee and has no formal authority.
Yeah, that's where things get a little interesting.
Seems a little contradictory.
It does. It raises questions about how involved he really is. It's kind of like walking a tightrope, you know?
Cool.
They want his expertise and his star power, but they also want to stay away from any controversy.
They want to have their cake and eat it, too.
Exactly. It's a bit like Anita Dunn's role in the Biden administration.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was a senior advisor, but without a title or salary.
Wow.
She had a lot of influence, but maintained a distance.
So they're comparing Musk to someone from a previous administration.
Yeah, it adds a whole other layer to this.
It does. And this isn't just about appearances. 14 states are suing Musk, DOGE, and Trump, claiming that his actions are unconstitutional.
That's right. The lawsuit says that Musk doesn't hold an office and doesn't have the authority of a principal officer.
So they're saying he's acting like he's in charge, even though he's not officially part of the government.
Basically, the lawsuit points to times when Musk was supposedly involved in firing government employees.
Hold on. Didn't the Justice Department defend those actions,
Did.
saying that Musk didn't directly fire anyone?
Yeah, their argument is that the firings were done by officials within the agencies, not by Musk or DOGE.
But does that really address the issue?
Well,
Even if he wasn't the one firing people, couldn't he still be influencing those decisions?
that's exactly what the lawsuit is getting at. It's not just about individual actions, but the potential for power in the hands of someone who wasn't elected.
Right.
And the fact that we haven't seen Musk's financial disclosure report makes things even murkier.
Okay, so there's this Special Government Employee Classification, or SGE. Can you
Yeah.
break that down for us? What does that mean?
An SGE is basically someone who works for the government for 130 days or less in a year.
Okay.
In Musk's case, he isn't being paid, which lets the White House keep his finances private. The idea behind the SGE role is to bring in experts without all the usual bureaucracy.
Okay, I get that bringing in experts can be helpful.
Right.
But doesn't the lack of transparency, especially with someone like Musk who has all these business interests, raise some red flags?
It definitely does. We're
Yeah.
talking about someone who runs companies like Tesla and SpaceX.
Right.
Companies that get billions in government contracts.
Yeah, how can we know that he's acting in the best interest of the public when his own companies could gain or lose from what he does?
Exactly.
Musk has said that DOGE's work is transparent and that anyone can see if he's benefiting his own companies.
Mm-hmm.
But the lawsuit argues that we need access to his financial disclosures to actually verify that claim.
Right. It becomes a he said, she said situation.
Uh-huh.
And the lawsuit highlights a tension between Musk's own interests and his role in the government.
This is complicated.
Hmm.
So to recap, we have Musk in this undefined role, a lawsuit questioning if what he's doing is even allowed, and serious concerns about transparency and potential conflicts of interest.
You got it.
Where do we go from here?
Well, that's what we'll be looking at as we continue this deep dive.
Okay.
We'll dig deeper into the lawsuit, look at some historical comparisons, and consider what could happen with this unprecedented situation.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So this SGE thing, it sounds kind of like a loophole. You're saying it's for bringing in experts, but how do we know they aren't just using their position to help their own businesses?
It's a fair question. The SGE role was made to make it easier to get specific knowledge. But when it's someone like Musk whose companies get money from government contracts, the lack of transparency about their finances is worrying.
Especially since he's working on DOGE, which is literally about making the government more efficient and saving money.
Yeah.
Like putting the fox in charge of the henhouse, right?
That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, there's definitely a potential for conflict. This is where the comparison to Anita Dunn under Biden is helpful.
Okay,
Her role was similar, but her finances were public. That level of transparency should be the norm, no matter who's in charge.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what if the courts say what Musk's doing is unconstitutional? What would that mean for future collaborations?
That's the big question. It could lead to stricter rules about how people work with the government.
And that might scare away talented people who could actually help.
Exactly. It's a tough balance between encouraging new ideas and making sure our democracy is protected. This situation shows how complicated these partnerships between private companies and the government can be. It's not just about bringing someone in from the outside
Right.
and expecting them to work without any conflicts.
It's funny because Musk is known for pushing boundaries and breaking the rules. He's not exactly known for always following the rules.
That's true. And you could say that's part of why he's so successful in business, but with government, there are different expectations and standards.
It's like bringing a bull into a china shop.
Yeah.
You might break some things, but you might also get some fast innovation.
The question is at what cost? And who decides what gets broken and what gets built?
That is the question. And I think this is why transparency is so important. If the public doesn't know how decisions are made and who benefits from them, it makes people distrust the whole system.
Transparency is key for accountability. Without it, we're left with just guessing and suspicion. And in a democracy, that's dangerous. Why should the average person care about this whole Musk DOGE thing anyway?
Yeah, it seems like something that only affects the elite.
Well, it shows how important it is to be involved as citizens. We need to pay attention to who has power in our government and hold them accountable no matter who they are. It's easy to focus on the headlines and the personalities, but we can't lose sight of the bigger picture.
So it's not just about Musk. It's about the principles.
Exactly. This is about the integrity of our democracy and being transparent and accountable. And it makes us have some big questions about the balance of power between elected officials and people who aren't elected. If Musk can have so much influence without an official position, what does that say about the future of our government?
It's like a science fiction book come to life. A billionaire CEO controlling things from behind the scenes.
And we don't even know everything he's doing because of the lack of transparency. It's a bit unsettling, to say the least.
It definitely raises more questions than it answers.
Yeah.
And I think it shows a bigger trend where the lines between different areas of influence are becoming blurry.
Absolutely. And it's our responsibility as citizens to understand these complexities and demand answers from those in power. We can't just assume everything's okay because Elon Musk is involved. We have to be watchful and hold our leaders accountable no matter who they are.
It's like that saying, power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Exactly. And the best way to fight that corruption is through transparency and accountability. So we have Musk, this larger-than-life figure operating in this unclear space within the government. We have a lawsuit questioning if what he's doing is even legal. And we have serious concerns about transparency and potential conflicts of interest. What does it all mean? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
It feels like we've just scratched the surface here. What's the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think the big thing is this: we're in uncharted territory. This whole situation with Musk and DOGE raises big questions about what role private citizens should have in government. It makes us think about how far executive power can go and how important transparency and accountability are.
It's like we're watching a live experiment that could change how governments work in the future.
And what happens with this lawsuit could set a precedent for these kinds of partnerships moving forward. If what Musk is doing is considered unconstitutional, it could create a whole new set of rules for people working within the government.
That's interesting. It makes you think, do we want to risk scaring away talented people from helping the government by making things too strict? Or do we need those rules to protect our democracy?
It's a balancing act. We want to encourage new ideas and bring in experts to solve tough problems. But we also need to protect ourselves from people having too much influence and make sure our democratic institutions stay strong.
So this case really makes us think about those fundamental tensions. It's not a simple issue.
Exactly. And it brings up even more questions. If what Musk's doing is ruled unconstitutional, what could happen? Could it make talented people not want to help the government anymore? Could it lead to more regulations that stop innovation?
Or could it actually make our democracy stronger by reminding us how important checks and balances are? It's a lot to consider.
It is. This whole situation with Musk and DOGE is like a small example of a much bigger conversation. Technology, wealth, and government power are all mixed together in ways that are getting more and more complicated. We need to have thoughtful discussions about these things if we want to keep our democracy healthy.
This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive. It seems like we're just at the beginning of this story, and who knows what the impact will be.
Right.
What's one last thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I'd like them to think about this. If someone like Elon Musk, with all his money and influence, is facing these challenges, what does that mean for the average person's ability to get involved in their government and hold those in power accountable?
That's something to think about. This deep dive has given us all a lot to consider. Thanks for explaining this complex and evolving situation.
You're welcome. It's been great.